let's bring Martin in now. So how does the regional knowledge that you guys have basically make a difference in delivering the infrastructure?
I think it builds on quite nicely on from Trisha's observations there. If I think about where we're kind of coming from, there's a legacy of working as partners. The people who are, the organisations that are making commitments to subnational transport bodies are people and organisations who are used to working together. If I think about England's economic heartland, we've got a really good example of how this has been part of the DNA for some time. There's a project, East West Rail, the restoration of the rail link from Oxford to Cambridge, which has been promoted and developed by the local authorities working with the local enterprise partnerships over the last 20, 25 years. And we're getting now to the point where we will start to see diggers on the ground for the next stage, hopefully within the next 12 or 18 months. What's driven that has been a recognition by the partners that they need to work together on strategic issues, that there are certain projects where working together brings combined value. It sends a very clear message, not only to government, because we often think about sending the message to government. Actually, it's sending a message to the people that we want to invest in businesses, in housing developments. It sends a message there is investment in infrastructure that's going to be delivered, and it's being supported and promoted by the local communities. To show you how powerful this can come, when the Transport and Works Act for the next stage was recently consulted on, I kid you not, the response has been fantastic. There have, understandably been some objections, but the level of support, written support for that project is something in the order of 4 to 450 representations. When you hear the inspectorate say they have never seen levels of support for a project being stated so clearly at this stage, that says there's something being done right in the way we do things. And I think we need to use that experience and build upon and recognise that actually what we've got in all of the subnational transport bodies is a centre of excellence in effect. Whether it's about channeling and identifying priorities for investment, but also helping build knowledge and experience in how we identify schemes, how we plan them, how we develop them, how we deliver them. We're quite good in this country sometimes at having a particular way of doing things, getting it to work, and then forgetting about that. And in recent years, we've kind of seen a much greater desire to keep the knowledge and the learning. Now, at one level, we're seeing the tunnelling expertise from Crossrail being transferred to the Tideway Tunnel, which will be transferred to the HS2 tunnels. There's a level of knowledge and experience about how to get things done. And ourselves as SSDPs, our ability to actually bring that as centres of excellence, work with our local partners, and recognise that we have the capability to take this forward. And that allows us to take a much longer term view about the programme that we need to deliver, because I'm very much with Barry about this is about delivering and developing a programme of investment that we can have an engagement with government, but other investors. The investors are not just the public sector, it's the private sector as well. And having a programme approach where we can challenge some of the thinking. I think one of the themes I'm interested to hear explored over the next couple of days. Across the heartland, we are identifying doubling or tripling of the economy over the next 30 years. And I know there's similar objectives in other parts of the country. That's not business as usual. You will not deliver that and achieve the net betterment, which is what government is also looking to achieve, with doing business as usual. So that sets a challenge for us about thinking, what is it we should be designing now for deliver in 2030 or 2035? Because on some of the bigger infrastructure, that's the timescale we're looking at. So understanding as partnerships, collaborative, strategic partnerships, what we need for the communities moving forward, fitting that into using the resources that we have in the centres of excellence, and then putting together a programme that can challenge in a constructive way and make sure we have the delivery of the right infrastructure moving forward. That's where we can bring added value, and that's why the individual partners in all of our organisations are investing their own money alongside the department's money to create the capacity.
Maria, there's a sort of balance, isn't there, between devolution, where you have that real, ingrained regional knowledge, and actually needing to be quite big to have a voice. So where is that balance? Because you sort of probably sit somewhere in the middle, don't you?
We do, and as you know, we got the Midlands itself has only got one combined authority. With very clear views and a very articulated mayor, which we,
the four of you here, and you meet up and you work together,
Yeah.
but also you're also competing for money.
We are, and well, quite right, aren't we? Really, but seriously, this is why you're right. We are in that level that we need to acknowledge and support local activity, and then we need to also acknowledge that we've got national infrastructure that needs to serve national responsibilities, national purpose, a national role too. So is what we're coming into play, and particularly in terms of evidence base, is that we help our local partners, our members, our leaders, our businesses to understand what is required from the national network, what's being planned, what's being programmed from a national perspective, but also we work with them to understand, to make sure that that national network provides and unlocks growth for them, to actually support them for the local housing needs, for the local jobs, and forever. So the evidence needs to be pulled together, bottom up as well as top down. And at the moment, nobody was doing that. Everybody was having a very strong local voice, but was getting lost in the national picture. So national transport bodies and the work that Midlands Connect has definitely done through the transport strategies to actually articulate far better through proper evidence what kind of growth is happening, what sectors are thriving in the Midlands, what type of requirement they need from our roads, from our railways. And therefore, when Network Rail and Highways England engage with the Midlands about the next REAST investment programme, there's a clear understanding that actually this is not just about congestion. There's an area here that requires greater investment for housing, or to actually, this road will remain priority for the Midlands because look what's happening in terms of manufacturing and distribution centres. They're all based on the A46, by the way, which we're launching today, a fantastic report on the A46. So evidence base is really important, and that's what we've been celebrated, and that's what really brings the Midlands together, that understanding that our evidence is about ensuring the bottom-up approach it makes sense from a national perspective.
Barry, Martin touched on this a little bit. How do you know what you want in a few years' time? Because we're going to hear a lot over the next few days about this big revolution that's coming. Everyone kind of knows it's coming, but how do you know what infrastructure do you need? How do you know what to spend money on? How do you know what piece of digital technology to invest in and what not to invest in?
Well, I think the technology that's coming provides a fantastic opportunity. I think it'll help enormously in terms of congestion if we move to more car sharing or service sharing, cars as a service rather than ownership. So I think there's a lot of huge benefits will come from that. I think we'd all want to see the adoption of electric vehicles to be faster than the current target of 2040. I think it'll actually happen long before then anyway. So I think when we're looking at our planning, there's really two things we're really looking at. One is, do we think this is likely to be disrupted by future technology? Potentially. And secondly, if we're making that investment decision, how do we keep updating that as time progresses? And we have to be quite nimble, and this is where I think being regionally based allows you to be more nimble and closer to that decision making. So I think from that point of view, I think the role of subnational transport bodies can actually be really faster and more fleet of foot to that change, and to keep projects under review as we go forward. Now, I think at the moment, the technology and what we want will change less in the transport that we're dealing with, which is the pan-northern transport, than it will change within the urban areas. And I think the bigger, faster change will happen in those urban areas. And there's this sort of, I think it's called the Hemingway law of motion, where things happen very gradually, then suddenly. And technological change, I think transport planning will change more in the next 10 years than it has changed in the last 70. I think that change is happening now. I think it'll actually happen very quickly over the next few years as well. I think we're in a great position to make the most of that.
Okay, let's go to Slido. So I've got my glasses on, so I can just about read it. I'm getting to that age now. So the first, I can't see who it's from, but, anonymous, thank you very much. But let's put this to you, Rupert, and Tricia, perhaps you can come in on this as well. How can the STBs ensure that the economic benefit arguments are sufficiently robust to guarantee investment with the infrastructure plans?
So I think you've got to look at the Cities and Local Devolution Act. So you go back to the legislation. The purpose of STBs is to predominantly facilitate economic growth. And I think you couple that with the way in which the DFT are currently consulting on the appraisal process for transport interventions. There is an appetite, I think, to look at the wider strategic economic benefits. So rather than just, well, does it save time on your journey? Is it a safety issue, or is it whatever else? How is it contributing to delivering housing? How is it contributing to uplifts in GVA? And I think we are seeing a change in how government considers schemes and a step away from just purely looking at a traditional benefit-cost ratio against a web tag analysis. The focus on that strategic economic case is starting to gain some traction. So I think the STBs are well placed to make those economic benefit arguments. That's why I say go back to the legislation. That's what we're there to do, to facilitate growth. For Transport for the South East, we launched earlier this year our economic connectivity review in advance of our transport strategy. And that to us was saying, look, the way we've got to start is a look at the economy. Where are the growth spots? Where are the key corridors? How do we see the economy growing? Particularly in relation to the ports and airports and that sort of international connectivity. Let's get that bit nailed before we start to do the transport planning-y stuff around, this is the intervention we need here and this is what we need here. And I think Barry's point, the world is moving on so much. The pace of change is really going to gain momentum. And we have got to be, you used the term nimble. I think, both STBs and government and Treasury have to be nimble in considering, what is a strategic economic benefit to the different types of interventions, which may not be traditional interventions.
Tricia, we'll bring you in here. There's another question you can have a go at as well. So how do STBs work best with government? Although it does say not DFT, who offer brilliant support and challenge. Is that a DFT person there?
This is such a nice
Jessie
gig.
Norman's at the back.
This is lovely. I've never before been asked a question about DFT being brilliant. I mean, thank you, whoever the anonymous person out there, especially if I know you. I'm just going to come back, if it's all right, Richard, on the previous question really quickly, because I think this question around the economic relationship between transport and growth and development is absolutely central. And it sort of comes back to what I said earlier about doing good work. I think it's also, though, really important to do credible work, because obviously none of the people here would have done this, but there have been occasions on which people have said some pretty heroic things about the way in which investment in any given transport infrastructure scheme will guarantee a particular outcome in terms of economic development or a particular sector or a particular employer. And just tread carefully here. I mean, we know that transport is an important precondition for economic success, but it's not the only one. And I think one of the things I'd be looking for really compelling arguments from STBs is just understanding that bigger picture, understanding what are the barriers to growth at a cross-cutting level. Is it about transport? Is it about skills? Are there cultural things going on here as well? So seeing that whole picture of what the preconditions are for economic success, and not just kind of asserting it in a Kevin Costner field of dreams way that if we build enormous infrastructure, people will come and use it, because there are lots of case studies of that not actually happening in the real world. On the question about working with government, I would start with us. We're your allies, and I think use DFT as a kind of point of entry to the other bits of government that you may need to work with. But ask us, use our convening power to make sure that you're getting to BEIS or Treasury or DEFRA or MHCLG, and having that whole of government interest is going to be a good thing.
Martin and Rupert, you both want to come in on this?
Yeah, All I was going to say, I think what we're seeing is the benefit of having a regional body. It becomes, if you like, a focus from which other government departments can engage with the regions. So across the heartland, we recently were invited by DEFRA to go and brief the Council for Sustainable Business on what was happening in the heartland. The reason why that's important is there's this twin challenge for us about delivering economic growth, but delivering net betterment at the same time. And clearly, DEFRA and the 25-year environment plan is fundamentally part of that approach. Likewise, the connection with the economic agenda. The local enterprise partnerships are involved with all of us as bodies and are very much part of the Heartland approach. Across the Heartland, we've got the local enterprise partnerships working together to develop a strategic economic vision. We are sitting down working with them, and with them working with BEIS to understand and make sure that challenges on the transport system, like reducing the environmental impact, become business opportunities for the community across our corridor. Because if we want to tap into the technology and the innovation amongst Formula One Motor Valley and use that to deliver more efficient vehicles for our area, that's an economic success for us, but it's an export opportunity for those businesses. So it's joining it up, and I think that's the benefit of having STBs and regional structures. You can start having that genuine conversation.
Hopefully, but Rupert, you wanted to come in on this.
There's just a bit about other parts of government. We do have a relationship with MHCLG. We're talking with the government's nature conservation advisor about natural England and how we can get environmental considerations right at the outset of the design process, so that we don't end up in a pickle, at a public inquiry or prior to a public inquiry. So that, I think that relationship exists. Clearly we're keen to strengthen it, and we think that one of the ways in strengthening relationship with other government departments is working with the DFT to help open some doors and build those relationships.
Barry, quickly.
I think we would need to be, or we would be very unwise to underestimate the challenge that some of those other departments, particularly Treasury, can pose. And we often ask ourselves in the North, if HMT was based in Leeds, Manchester or Newcastle and had been there for the last 20 years, do we think the transport links would already be better? And the answer is yes, we do think that, because they'd intuitively understand that the east-west links don't work well, and therefore the case would be more easily made. So we have to provide the evidence. We have in the Treasury a Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Economics combined, and I think quite often the Ministry of Finance, those that control the spending, have quite often the upper hand. So therefore we're spending a lot of money and time establishing an evidence base and a team of people to provide that evidence. Not to say there's a guaranteed outcome to this investment, but there's a range of scenarios that can happen if that investment is made. But we all have to work very closely with DFT, but we have to work incredibly closely with Treasury as well, because that case, you mentioned Formula One, on a Formula One racetrack, if you spin off or come off the main track into the gravel trap, the interaction of 1,000 little things can slow you down very dramatically. And I think the Treasury can often be the gravel trap for investment. And we need to stay on the track and keep going at speed, but we need the evidence base to make sure we do that.